In May 1925, a man walked into a hotel in Paris. He was well-dressed, confident, charming. He spoke 6 languages fluently. He had forged government stationery in his briefcase, and he was about to do something so audacious, so completely and utterly insane that when people heard about it later, they assumed it was a joke. He was going to sell the Eiffel Tower, not as a tourist attraction, not as a landmark, as scrap metal. And he was going to do it to 5 businessmen simultaneously, none of whom would know the others existed. His name was Victor Lustig, and this is the story of the most charming criminal who ever lived. Victor Lustig was born on January 4, 1890, in Hostinec, Bohemia, part of what is now the Czech Republic. He grew up in a comfortable family. He was educated, bright, the kind of child teachers loved. He was also, from a very young age, fascinated by one specific question. Not how do things work, but how do people work? What makes someone trust you? What makes someone hand over their money? What makes a perfectly intelligent adult believe something they shouldn't? He spent his entire life answering that question. He mastered multiple languages and honed his skills on transatlantic ocean liners, the luxury ships carrying wealthy passengers between Europe and America. This was his classroom. Captive audience, long voyages, bored rich people with money and time, and absolutely nothing to do except talk to interesting strangers. Victor Lustig was the most interesting stranger they had ever met. By the time the ship docked, they were lighter in the wallet, and they had no idea how it happened. He had a system, a set of rules he called the 10 Commandments for Con Men. Be a patient listener. Never look bored. Never reveal your real opinion. Always agree with the mark. And most importantly, never rush. The con man who talks too much is already losing. The con man who listens wins every time. Victor Lustig listened better than anyone. May 1925, Lustig was reading a newspaper in Paris when he came across a story about the Eiffel Tower. The city was debating what to do with it. It had been built as a temporary structure for the 1889 World's Fair. 36 years later, it was still standing. The maintenance costs were enormous. Some officials genuinely believed it should be torn down and sold for scrap. Victor Lustig read that article, folded the newspaper, and had the single greatest criminal idea in the history of fraud. He forged official French government stationery. He invented a fictional title for himself, Député Directeur Général of the Ministère des Postes. He hired a government limousine, and he invited 5 of Paris's most successful scrap metal dealers to a private meeting at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the most expensive hotels in the city. He told them the meeting was confidential, a matter of national importance. The government had made a difficult decision. The Eiffel Tower was to be demolished, and they were being given the exclusive opportunity to bid on the scrap metal. He posed as a French government official and selected his marks carefully. Men wealthy enough to afford it, hungry enough to want it, and proud enough to never admit they had been fooled. He took them on a tour of the tower, official documents in hand. Government car waiting outside. Every detail confirmed the story. One man in particular, a dealer named André Poisson, was desperate to prove himself in Parisian high society. He wanted the contract. He wanted it badly. Lustig sensed it immediately. He pulled Poisson aside privately. He lowered his voice. He confessed, man to man, that his government salary was embarrassingly low, that a small personal gift alongside the official payment would help move things along. He was asking for a bribe, and Poisson paid it. Because in his mind, a corrupt official asking for a bribe was the most believable thing in the world. Only a real government man would be bold enough to ask. Poisson paid for the Eiffel Tower. Lustig took the money and disappeared. He waited and waited for the police, for the newspapers, for the scandal. Nothing came. Poisson was too humiliated to go to the police. He had bought the Eiffel Tower. He could never tell anyone. Victor Lustig understood something that most people never realize. The most powerful weapon a con man has is not the lie he tells. It's the victim's own pride, which makes it impossible for them to admit they were fooled. Here is where the story stops being impressive and starts being something else entirely. A month later, Lustig returned to Paris, selected 6 new scrap metal dealers, and tried to sell the Eiffel Tower again. Not because he needed the money, because he wanted to see if he could. This time, one of the dealers went to the police. Lustig escaped anyway, because of course he did. Selling the Eiffel Tower twice was not the most dangerous thing Victor Lustig ever did. That came later, in Chicago, in a room with Al Capone. Lustig persuaded Al Capone to invest $50,000 in a stock deal, knowing full well that failure meant certain death. $50,000 from the most feared gangster in America. Lustig took the money, placed it in a safe deposit box, and did absolutely nothing with it for 2 months. Then he went back to Capone. He explained, with great regret, that the deal had fallen through, that the investment hadn't worked out, that he was deeply sorry. Capone was deciding which bridge to throw him from. Then Lustig reached into his bag and, to Capone's complete shock, produced the full $50,000, every dollar. Capone stared at him. Lustig shrugged, said he felt terrible about the failed deal. The least he could do was return the investment. Capone, stunned and disarmed, gave him $5,000 as a gesture of goodwill. Victor Lustig had just conned Al Capone out of $5,000 by returning his own money to him. The greatest trick he ever pulled wasn't selling a landmark. It was making the most dangerous man in Chicago feel sorry for him. His criminal career finally ran out of steam when the Secret Service caught him in 1935. Even then, he escaped custody once by fashioning a rope from bedsheets and climbing out of a hotel window, because of course he did. He was eventually convicted of counterfeiting and sentenced to 20 years in Alcatraz. While in Alcatraz, he filed more than 1,000 medical complaints. Most were ignored until his health visibly declined. He was transferred to a federal hospital in Springfield, Missouri. He died on March 11, 1947. He was 57 years old. His death wasn't publicly confirmed until 1949, when his brother appeared in a courtroom on counterfeiting charges of his own. "Do you have a brother known as the Count?" the judge asked. "Yes," his brother replied. "His name was Victor. He was my only brother." And then, the detail that makes the whole story perfect. His death certificate listed his occupation as Apprentice Salesman, the man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice, who conned Al Capone, who was arrested 37 times across 2 continents, who spoke 6 languages, and fooled half of Europe, died in a prison hospital, listed as an apprentice. Here is what Victor Lustig actually understood that most people never will. He never broke into anywhere. He never threatened anyone. He never used a weapon. Every single person who ever gave him money did so completely voluntarily, because he gave them exactly what they wanted most. Not money, not a landmark, not a stock deal. He gave them the feeling that they were special, that they had been chosen, that this opportunity, this once-in-a-lifetime moment, had come to them because they deserved it. And that feeling, the feeling of being the one person smart enough to see what others missed, is worth more than the Eiffel Tower. Victor Lustig didn't sell scrap metal. He sold people the version of themselves they most wanted to believe in, and they lined up to buy it. Twice.